Good morning, guys. Over 2 weeks ago now, nearly 3 weeks ago, I was in hospital. I had some surgery done on my lower spine, a microdiscectomy. I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't know the ins and outs, literally. It was a reasonably important operation. Basically, I had one or two slip discs in my lower spine, and I'm not going to go into all the details. I'm doing relatively well. I just want to thank you all for your prayers and for your messages of support. We've had so many people come round and even give us some food and just give us so much support and love and encouragement from the church family, from those of you who belong to TTS, from the wider church family here in Chester. I had my mum and dad come and stay, not just once but twice, and we couldn't have done it without them. And of course my wife Jo was just amazing throughout it all. The experience of the operation itself was better than I could have imagined. I was anxious going into it. I was anxious about a number of things, about the general anaesthetic. I hadn't had one before, about a possible dye injection into my lower back that might have been necessary. In the end, it proved unnecessary. I'd also never stayed in hospital before, so there was that too. But in the end, it was better than any of us could have imagined. God surrounded us with his peace and with his comfort, and he went before us in all this and just really cleared the way. It was such an easy experience, relatively speaking. On the Sunday before the operation, which was on a Wednesday, we met for a foundation session. In view was the doctrine of the Incarnation. We were really getting into the nitty-gritty of what it means for Jesus to have been 100% God and 100% man. In the 3rd century, Origen of Alexandria said the following about this doctrine: "But of all the marvellous and mighty acts related of God, this altogether surpasses human admiration, that the wisdom of God, that the very word of the Father can have entered the womb of a woman and have been born an infant and have uttered wailings like the cries of little children." I just want you to imagine that for a moment. Many of you will be parents yourselves, or will have had an experience of holding a tiny newborn infant. You know what that's like, the strange fuzz that they have on them, the strange little motions that they make, the strange little sounds that they make. And I just want you to imagine that in very real terms in your minds. There would have been no difference 2,000 years ago had we time traveled back and held the newborn Christ in our arms. He wouldn't have glowed, he wouldn't have shone, he wouldn't have been magnetic, there wouldn't have been sparks. He would have been, to the human eye, completely and utterly normal and ordinary. And yet, if you were able to go back in time and hold this newborn Jesus in your arms, this baby that is so utterly vulnerable and dependent on his mother for all things, so completely and utterly like any other newborn baby, you would have been holding the very one who is holding you, who is holding all your atoms together, who is giving you breath, who is giving you life, who is sustaining you, not only you, but every single other person. And not only every single other person, but all living things, all of the earth, all of the galaxy, all of the universe. In that session before the operation, Fiona Graham, who is one of the leaders at TTS who helps me lead many of the sessions, shared something that was of great encouragement to me, an application from this doctrine to my own circumstances in that moment. She pointed out the similarity between myself lying on the operating table, completely vulnerable and exposed, and the Christ child, completely vulnerable, and yet entirely safe in the purposes of God. Just as those purposes were sovereign and safe and secure, so too, Fiona explained, his purposes for me on that operating table, as I'm completely vulnerable and exposed, were unassailable and secure. And I'm making this point because I want us to see how this doctrine, and indeed all doctrine, isn't just something for the head, but is something for all of your life. Because I went into that hospital, yes, anxious, nervous, certainly, but also strengthened by this truth that I'd seen in the doctrine of Incarnation, that God is with me, that God is for me, the God of Incarnation, the God who is revealing himself in Christ, reconciling the world to himself, the one whose purposes are unassailable, undefeatable. He is for you. And if he is for you, what can stand against you?